when we talked on the phone yesterday about, some of the things that you were trying to bring about and kind of change and stuff. Like you said that when you were there was like some vendors and stuff that are still going through. So how do you start, mitigating access to people and like kind of contemplating when they should be there, when they shouldn't, like that? How do you manage that?
Well, and really that's part of a bigger picture of third-party risk, is recognizing that you have this vast landscape and all these different attack points. And one of the biggest things, especially coming out of the post-Cities ransomware incident, is you start to look at, okay, what could we have done better? What could we do? And really just knowing who's in your house, knowing who's there. Are they supposed to be there? Have they exceeded? Or, in this case, there's times when I would sit in folks' offices and watch certain contractors go by with the logoed vest and everything, thinking, well, I haven't seen a contract come through for them to be working on anything this week. I thought they had finished something else. Like, what's going on? Are they just wrapping up? But having that catalog and that inventory and having a hands-on approach is really helpful when you start looking at one of the highest infection, threat vectors for ransomware incidents, et cetera, malware coming into your ecosystem. It's typically through third parties, vendors, because they don't have the same interest or self-preservation of it's your system. It's okay. Yeah. It's not theirs. If it was their house, they would pay attention, but whatever you want to do at your house.
Yeah. I mean, what are the most, I guess, like prevalent, like threats or something in a location like that?
Well, and it's the same threats that you find everywhere else. And that's one of the things, the Atlantic Council just released an update to their aviation cybersecurity report. And one of the things in working with the author and in the aviation industry is recognizing, you think of aviation cybersecurity and you think of the airplane. Well, but the airport itself is actually, connected. You've got restaurants, you've got retailers, you've got point of sale systems, you've got everyone trying to connect their iPad to watch the Netflix and chill while they're waiting for their next flight. You've got all the same threats that you find anywhere else in an environment with a higher stakes, higher risk, because if something goes wrong in aviation and transportation, there's not a lot of room for error. And so that was one of the biggest challenges, is having both from the airport side, but also from a resource side, having that discussion where you do realize we face the same risks and identifying and taking the same protocols. I mean, you have this, only a handful of vendors that provide all of the software and systems that are running the electronic signage. And so you've seen airports over in the UK that have had ransomware incidents on their electronic, their arrivals, departures. So if you thought your mad dash across Hartsfield was bad, imagine if you didn't have the directional signage telling you where your connecting flight was.
Wow.
And it's kind of fun. If you go back and look at the pictures, it's fun after the fact, but they had people standing there holding whiteboards saying, flight to this and erasing, and you had to go old school.
Yeah. It's not something that I would have thought of as like that. You would most people probably assume that everything is connected internally to the same, system, but to know that they don't do it that way. And you have to do whiteboards to get a workaround.
Well, it's every different airline is responsible, for example, for their gates. So they lease those gates from the airport. So Delta's in charge of its system, and it's where American Airlines, United, everyone else, and so you have to get them to play together nicely, of their systems to all communicate, as well as working with the city's system, the aviation's network, as well as every other vendor who's coming in and out of there. So it kind of takes everything and multiplies it by factors of 10.
Yeah.
20, from there.
So is it all done by like gate? So like, gate C is all run by whatever airline is there. Does that include all the vendors and everything that might be at that gate? Or do they then each have their own little network that they're working on? Or is it all run?
So it's both. In one incident that had gotten a little bit of media play or whatever, there's one software provider that provides the load balancing software for every major airline. So they've had a couple of glitches, let's call them. And so if they go down, then the flights can't do the calculation. So each individual flight, be it Delta, American Airlines, United, whoever's using that software, in this case, everyone, has to ground all their flights until they can come up with an alternative mechanism. So you have instances like that, whereas the electronic signage at each gate that they're using, that's going to be one vendor that's doing it. But whether it comes to, and you see this if perhaps the carpeting is not as fresh, maybe it's worn in a certain area, some of that will fall on different individual airports. They have consortiums that have come together to say, okay, we're going to take responsibility, a joint responsibility for maintenance of this system. Well, a different area of the airport may be actually maintained by the Department of Aviation through the city. So that's what I say. It gets interesting, especially when you have stuff like a power outage that I'm not saying that ever happened at Atlanta, but as I'm nodding vigorously, it shut down the airport for several hours, which caused this ripple effect. And then having to peel back the layers of the onion to figure out, well, who's responsible for this section of the electrical grid for feeding the airport. That got to be a little fun because everyone's pointing fingers of, well, it's not my problem that you're stuck on the tarmac for hours on end in the dark. Like, no, it's this guy over here. It's somebody else.
It's that person, yeah.
Exactly. Everyone but me.